Bingo. Okay. So today I'm very excited to welcome Diane Swallow of Trilogy Life Coaching to talk to us about women in leadership, the menopause, and everything that goes along with that. And I was just telling Diane, I was at my dental appointment this morning talking to my female dentist, and I was telling her we were doing this talk when I got home, and she got very excited about it, and she said, did I know that she'd just read an article stating that 30% of women dentists quit the profession due to menopausal issues or at the time of menopause? And I was just flabbergasted. I was like, 30% is huge. So I was just sharing that with Diane, and she's got so much information to share with us. So I'm very excited to have you here, Diane. So tell us a little bit what you got to share, and then I'll let you hop on in.
Thank you. So, yeah, thank you, Helen, for inviting me to do a Trailblazer talk this week. I'm very excited to be here, and I've enjoyed the talk so far this week, so it's been good. And so I'm a menopause and wellness coach, and I want to talk to you today about managing your menopause with confidence and ease. So I came to this by my own sort of meltdown, for want of a better word, during the menopause, and not realizing that that's what was happening to me. It felt like it was a big burnout in my midlife, and it was exacerbated by weight gain and stress and a stressful job and the menopause. And basically I had to learn new habits in order to recover both my physical, mental and emotional health. And now, as a result of that, I'm on a mission to help women who feel that they're overwhelmed in midlife and with the menopause. And I want to help them to pursue new ways of health and wellness, so that it enables them to really manage, the symptoms that most people experience in menopause. And ultimately, what I want to help women do is to rebuild their confidence. I'm going to start with a story. So this story is about a famous TV presenter here in the UK. She's known in the sports world mainly, but she does do other TV presentations too. And her story started with her publishing, I think it was last year, an article about how she had planned to leave her family, her husband and two teenage twins, and how she had planned to leave them, and because she was experiencing what she was calling as well this menopause meltdown. And she realized that she got entered into what we call the perimenopause when she was about 47. But what she was unprepared for was the emotional turmoil that this put her into. She understood some of the physical symptoms, but she hadn't been prepared for this emotional turmoil. And she said this was probably a very, very low point for her when she announced this to her husband and children. Obviously, they were devastated. And in the end, she went to her GP, and here in England, we call them GPs, the doctors or healthcare providers. And so she did get prescribed HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and that helped to alleviate some of her physical symptoms. But she said that really she had expected that things would change physically, but she hadn't really been prepared for the emotional impact. And this is something I hear over and over again from women. They didn't understand fully the physical symptoms, but how overwhelming they can be. But also, they had no idea of the mental and emotional turmoil that this was going to put them into. So subsequently, Gabby has written a book about her experience of the menopause, and she writes in that book this sentence: midlife is a period of life that should be embraced. There's loads to be excited about. And I loved it when I read that, because I thought, yeah, absolutely, there is loads to be excited about. It doesn't feel like it when you're in the midst of all that turmoil, but it definitely is as you come out through the other side and regain strength and embrace habits that are going to help you into your post-menopause life, then you'll find that life has meaning and is worthwhile again. And there were 4 issues that came up for me when I read Gabby's story. The first one, or before we just go on to those 4 issues, the first thing, if you see in red there, it says, so what, get over it. Do you think you're the only woman that has had this issue? And that was a comment that was left on after the article that she'd written. Somebody left that as a comment. And again, it's something I hear over and over again from people who don't understand, or people who are going through it. And they say, you know, my husband says, just pull yourself together. Or, you know, boss at work says, oh, just get on with it. And I hear it so many times that, you know, it pains me so much, because it shouldn't be like that, because it is a physical process that you can't control. And you have to be very well informed to be able to manage it with confidence and ease. And that's really what I love about what I do, is that I can help women to change things around from where they've been feeling at their lowest point to having hope again. So first of all, let's look at, what does this mean? What is the menopause? Obviously, it's a natural biological process, and it marks the end of a woman's reproductive years. And typically it occurs between the ages of 45 and 55, but that can vary. I'm currently talking to women who are in their late 30s and already experiencing symptoms of the menopause. And some women, they don't, their periods are still continuing when they get to 60 years old. So that's a late onset menopause. So it's obviously, the physical side is the ovaries gradually stop producing eggs, and therefore there's a decline in the production of your hormones. And those hormones are estrogen and progesterone. And this hormonal shift can lead to a variety of physical symptoms and emotional symptoms. The most common physical symptoms that we know about are things like hot flushes and night sweats and sleep disturbance, but the mood changes, I think, are things that people don't really know and understand so well. So the menopause is considered to be complete when a woman has had 12 consecutive months without a menstrual period. And that can go on for a number of years, where, you know, you're adjusting to erratic periods and then long periods without them. And then eventually you realise that you've got to that 12-month point and you're now in what we call post-menopause. So there are 3 stages. First of all, you've got perimenopause, which is when you're going through all the symptoms. And the second stage is the menopause, which is that moment when you realise, I've now had 12 consecutive months without a period. And then after that, you're considered to be post-menopause. So for ease of this presentation, I'd probably refer mostly to menopause, but take that as I'm encompassing all 3 of those, rather than going back and forth maybe and confusing you. So, common symptoms of the menopause. The most common one that people recognise, because grandmas are constantly having to fan themselves with hot flushes that come at irregular moments and irregular times, and that's really quite hard. And then you've got the fact that the symptoms can range in people from very severe to very mild. And I talk to women all the time. Some have very mild symptoms of things like hot flushes and night sweats, and other people have very severe symptoms. And, you know, there's no pattern. That's the thing. It's a different pattern for every single woman. So it's about finding out what works and then tweaking those habits that will help you to manage it in a much better way, rather than be overwhelmed by it, really. So a hot flush will be this feeling of warmth that comes over you and you're sweating. It can be rapid. You have rapid heartbeat, and they can last again for a few minutes to a few seconds. It just varies. Got night sweats, that are episodes of sweating that occur during sleep, causing disrupted sleep and fatigue. I remember that one very well, because I would wake up and the bed would be soaked. I have to wake up my husband, change the sheets. He wasn't happy. And so you can imagine it causes a lot of anxiety. And then, of course, you've got the hormonal changes that produce the mood changes, or the mood swings, I suppose, irritability and anxiety and depression. And that decrease in estrogen can also cause the next symptom on the list here, vaginal dryness and the thinning of the vaginal wall. And this leads to discomfort during sexual activity and an increased risk of vaginal infections. And so those are all things that people are not prepared for. But if you have the information beforehand and recognize it, then there is help available. There's help available from your healthcare provider, but there's also things that you can do to help yourself to manage those things in a much better way. There's also sleep disturbance. I've mentioned that about the night sweats, but then there's also just general insomnia and waking up in the night. And then finally, those changes in your menstrual cycle. Women often tell me that they are experiencing decreased libido and sexual desire, and others may be experiencing pain or discomfort during intercourse due to vaginal dryness. So all these things are important to know that they happen to some women, and there is help, and you can work out how to do this. So the changes in the menstrual cycle as a woman approaches menopause, their periods have become irregular, heavier or lighter, and until eventually they're going to cease altogether. That's the good news, that eventually you come out the other side. And it's important to know that there is hope. And that's what I find with the women that I work with, that they come to me and they say, we have hope for the first time in probably a number of years, because this is something that can go on in the perimenopause with all those symptoms going on for maybe 5 to 7 years is the most common amount of time for women to go through this. It's a long time, isn't it, in your life? It really is. So what I want to come on to now is my story. So here you can see a photo of me with my husband. And this is going back to probably, I was trying to think how long ago, so probably my early 50s, I would have thought. And you can see that sort of smile that's looking a bit stressed. I think actually this was either my birthday party or our wedding anniversary. I couldn't quite remember. And, you know, forcing that smile, trying to be jolly and just feeling terrible, not wanting to look in the mirror, just feeling dreadful. And then on the other side is a photograph from a couple of years ago. I'm now into my 60s, but, you know, as a result of the habits that I put in place and the way that I now manage my health and my wellness, I've been able to lose a lot of weight. And my husband also lost a lot of weight. Between us, we lost a small person. So in the UK, that's stones. We do stones and pounds. So it was 9 stone together we lost. So 4 stone would be 4 times 14. That's how much I lost. But it wasn't only the weight. It was other things as well. It was managing the stress. It was understanding that these things weren't my fault as well, because I thought this is my fault. I'm not coping at work. I was a head of department in a very busy secondary school, and I just sort of was under scrutiny all the time. There were things that I was needing to do that I couldn't get to, and so I felt a failure. And I didn't realise at the time that this was actually the menopause or perimenopause that I was going through, and I was being overwhelmed by symptoms. I did eventually get to my GP, and the first thing that they seem to do in the UK is to put you on antidepressants, which is what she did. And that can help, but it doesn't always help, and it can take quite a long time to help. And in the end, between the two of us, we came to the conclusion that for me, that wasn't particularly helping. So then we moved on to HRT. But I was only on HRT, hormone replacement therapy, for probably about 6 months, and it helped a bit. But in the end, I took I went down the route of finding a very good counselling therapist. And she was the one who helped me to get out of the fog and to begin to see the wood for the trees, really. And after that, I began to look at health and wellness for myself and how I could manage that. And from that, you know, as I said, I'm now passionate to help other women, because I know how much help is required, because the medical profession is not yet up to speed with all of this. And that's part of the problem. So managing your perimenopause symptoms. So healthy lifestyle is really important. I've already talked about that. And a healthy lifestyle, what does that look like? We all know it, don't we? Regular exercise, a balanced diet, and adequate sleep. And all of those things can help you generally with your general health and wellness, but it will definitely help you in the time when you're trying to manage these perimenopause symptoms. So it's important to start to look at that. It's important to understand what you need to do to improve your health. And again, it's different for everybody. We all start at a different point, and But the importance of that is that you are feeling in control and you are helping to manage your symptoms. The second thing here is the hormone replacement therapy, the HRT, that can help, but it's important, you know, you have to go to your doctor and discuss the risks and the benefits with your doctor before beginning treatment. And they're showing of late that they now have what they call bioidentical HRT, and that is much more, has more benefits than the previous HRT that they had. And they're beginning to show that the research that was done that said that women could get breast cancer from HRT was now not even correct then, but nowadays with bioidentical HRT, it's much safer. And the general consensus in the medical profession is that this is a safer way to go forward. But obviously it's not suitable for everybody, and not everybody can have HRT. So your doctor or your health care provider can talk you through all of that. You can also use over-the-counter remedies such as herbal supplements, and a lot of people find these very useful. Things like black cohosh, soy products may help to alleviate symptoms, but again, it is always a good idea to check with other medication that you might be taking that it's okay to add these in. And it does help a lot of women. I do talk to women who find it very useful and very helpful. And then, of course, there's stress management. Now, this can exacerbate the menopause, which I think in my case it did. Being head of department in a very busy school, there was a lot of stress anyway. But on top of that, there was the stress from the overwhelming symptoms. And so I had to learn how to manage my stress. Eventually, I did step out of teaching earlier than I had hoped. I stepped out around the age of 55. I had wanted to stay until 60 when I could take my teaching pension, but I just realised that if I didn't step out of it, then I probably wouldn't get to 60. And that was a recognition that I had to come to. But unfortunately, in a little while, we're going to see some statistics about how many women do step out of the workplace because of being overwhelmed by their symptoms, and it's very sad. So obviously, I talked a little bit earlier about vaginal dryness, and this is something that women do experience during the perimenopause, and you can get things to help with that from your healthcare provider or over the counter, and it helps with both the dryness, and sometimes there are things that you can get too that will help with painful sex too. And the thing is, women suffer in silence, don't they? That's the problem. And unless we are willing to step up and talk about these things, unless we're willing to step up and go and actually say to our healthcare provider, our GPs, look, I really need some help here. This is what's happening to me and I need some help. Then, you know, the things in the medical profession aren't going to change quickly unless we're willing to do that. And then finally, if your symptoms are very severe or they really do interfere with your daily activities, then it is important to seek help, and seeking professional help from your GP, your healthcare provider, or from a counsellor or therapist is really important. And I think in the end, for me, that was a large part of what saved the day. And it's just reflecting, isn't it, on, is my daily life going as I would want it to? And if the answer is no, I'm just overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, I can't manage, then that probably is the time to get help. And again, we hold back, don't we? And what I want to get across is that we don't have to hold back. Help is out there. We just have to be willing to say, I need it and I'm going to go and find it. So I've touched a little bit on this, but in perimenopause, sexual health is a problem. And as I've already said, the vaginal dryness is a problem because what happens is the tissues become thinner because of the lack of the hormones that's happening in your body. And so it causes a discomfort or pain during sex. And there are lubricants out there, there are things out there that can help with that. So it's important that you know that that is available. And then decreased libido, same reason, it can be uncomfortable. And again, you can talk to a therapist, a counsellor, you can talk to your healthcare providers, and they will be able to show you where you can get help or explain to you how you can help. The other thing that I really suffered from during this time was the urinary incontinence and the urinary tract infections as well. That was something that just plagued me the whole time. It doesn't plague everybody, but it did plague me. And again, took me a while to understand that this was a result of what was happening to me during my perimenopause years. And I didn't really understand that. So it's important that we understand that that can be a problem. And then finally, again, you can talk about HRT to your healthcare provider that will help you to understand, that will help you if you're struggling with this area of sexual health. It can be helpful. And then here we have emotional well-being during perimenopause. We have mood changes and sleep disturbance and self-care, counselling and HRT. All those things I've touched on already and talked about. But this is directly what we're looking at here is your emotional well-being, which is what the story I told you about at the beginning was referring to, wasn't it? She was saying that she wasn't prepared for this emotional downturn, this emotional onslaught that she felt she couldn't cope and didn't know what to do with her life anymore. And she felt the only way to keep her family safe was for her to move out. And that's just not acceptable, is it? We need to know that we don't have to get to that stage and that we can get help that we need. So obviously with mood changes, it includes irritability and anxiety and depression. And this is caused by those hormonal changes. It's not something we've brought on ourselves. It's something that happens to our body and we can't control it. But we can get help and we can make sure that we are adopting health and wellness practices that are going to be useful to us. The sleep disturbances, again, we've talked about the night sweats, we've talked about the just the whole thing about insomnia. And again, we can try to reduce the stress that we're feeling, which will then help us to sleep better. And you can do that really by adopting techniques like deep breathing exercises, which will promote restful sleep. And also sometimes medication can be prescribed. And I think that when I went to my GP at one point, they did prescribe sleeping pills for me, but I had a nasty reaction to those, so I didn't use them again. And it's hard. I found that really hard. I didn't really want to take them anyway, but in the end, for the time that I was able to take them, it did help. But again, it's something very personal, isn't it? And you have to know where you're at with this and know how much it's causing you an issue to be able to go and say, I need some help with that. Of course, practicing self-care is important. You know, we want to engage in the regular exercise, we want to have a balanced diet, spend time with loved ones. All those things can improve our emotional well-being. And if you're experiencing difficulties in this area, then again, you can find a therapist, go to counselling, and you can find therapists who will help with menopause-related issues with your emotional well-being during menopause. And then again, at the end here, we've got the HRT, the hormone replacement therapy. Again, it's not for everybody, but it's something worth talking to your healthcare provider about, because it is really important that you understand the benefits, you understand the risks, and you talk all of that through and you know whether it's right for you or not. So we're just going to quickly come on now to postmenopause. And postmenopause, there are some health considerations that you need to think about, really. Just before I go on to this, I was going to tell you a little story. So I did my first webinar online that had gone out on Facebook ads, and I had about 25 people there. And my tech guy, he said, I'll come on the webinar and I'll make sure all the tech stuff's in place and I'll check the comments for you, and you know, I'll be able to help out. So I said, that's great, thank you. So he did all of that for me, and afterwards we were sort of texting back and forth, and he said to me, oh, Diane, he said, I have learned so much. I had no idea of any of this. I was like, he's in his 40s and his partner is coming up into her 40s. And he was just like, I had no idea. So I said, well, I'm glad you learned a lot, because it's something really that if, you know, we don't start opening up the conversation and driving the conversation, the men are going to lag behind as well and not understand that we're not doing it deliberately. It's something that has happening to our bodies, and they need to understand it too. So here are some of the considerations during your postmenopause time. So again, that decrease in estrogen levels is responsible really for most of this, especially for the bone density, the osteoporosis. You know, we need to work at keeping our bone density up, and the way we do that is weight-bearing exercise. You know, you can look all that up online. It's easy to find out what that is and what that looks like. And also to take calcium and vitamin D. Again, you need to check those out with your healthcare provider and make sure that that's fine for you, depending on what other medications you're on and your lifestyle and everything. But there are things to consider and things that you need to be able to talk about. There's also the risk of heart disease, and that does increase slightly because, again, of that drop in hormone levels. But a healthy diet and exercising regularly can help with that. And you should have your blood pressure checked, you should have your cholesterol levels checked, the glucose levels checked, and all of those things can help with that healthy lifestyle that's going to mitigate that risk of cardiovascular disease. And I have to say, these are all small risks. They're not large risks, but they're risks that if we're aware of them, we can start to manage it for our own better health. Also, breast cancer is an increased risk, and so you should continue to have regular mammograms once you're in postmenopause, and be aware, as you hopefully always have been, of any changes that are taking place in your breasts and report any concerns to your GP. And then we've talked about sexual health already, but that sometimes for some women can continue on into the postmenopause stage. Not for every woman, but if it does, again, you can seek help and find out what is available to help you. And then again, your mental health, just be on top of that, be aware of it, make sure that you are doing good health and wellness practices that will help you to keep your mental health, you know, on top of your game, really, with your mental health. Right, so we're coming towards the end, so I will try to be brief with these next couple of slides. Now, this has become a passion of mine as I've taken this on and looked at it. It really has become such a passion because, as Helen told us her story so well of her dentist, you know, it is so difficult for women who are overwhelmed with their symptoms to remain in the workplace. And it says here, 1 in 10 women may leave the workforce in midlife. So that's a lot, isn't it? 1 in 10 women. And why? It's because we don't have the information that we need or the practical resources we need to manage the symptoms so they don't overwhelm us. And that's just, I mean, it's like I said to Helen before we came on live, I said, it's like living in the dark ages, isn't it? You know, we need to be able to have this information. This information needs to be available to us. And, you know, it's still menopause and all things related to menopause, like the whole sexual health side of it and the mental health side of it. You know, it's still taboo. They're still taboo subjects, and that's important that we start up conversations wherever we are, whatever we're doing. If it's not for us, if we're not in the menopause, it's who do we know that is? Who can we support? Who can we help? I've got 2 daughters who are currently in their mid-30s, and you know, they're not that far off, 10 years away, and they will be starting with symptoms. And you know, I want to educate them and to help them to understand that they can help themselves. And they can access all the information that they need. We don't want women to suffer alone, and many women do feel that. They feel like they are suffering alone, and that as well has an impact on their work because they don't feel that they can talk to anybody. And as far as work in the workplace is concerned, it's actually going to help the bottom line in a business, isn't it? It's going to decrease absenteeism. It's going to stop that you know, that drain of good people from the workplace. So it's in our best interest as CEOs, whether we're founder CEOs or whether we're in corporate businesses or whatever it is in the workplace where we are, we want to be able to be part of starting up, you know, almost a revolution really, to say, look, we've got to talk about this. We've got to be able to break the silence so that we can help women, but also, you know, the bottom line in business is we don't want that drain from the workforce and having to recruit new people and train them up when we didn't have to do that. And, you know, my hope really is that I inspire and energize you to tap into the power of women in the prime of their working lives. You know, it's almost like I felt the other day, it's almost like being part of that suffragette movement from 100 years ago, you know, when they were sort of, you know, breaking down doors, literally setting, things are light, and not that I recommend any of that, but starving themselves and all of that in order to make their point. And I think that I'm passionate about wanting to really get this out there so that we can talk about it openly, that it isn't a taboo subject, that we can help one another to be able to have a better future and not to feel like we've crashed and burned during midlife. It's the worst thing. So we don't really want that. We want to be able to open up the discussion for people. I've got another slide here. There we go. So there are some very uncomfortable statistics here. I'm just coming into land now. So these uncomfortable statistics, as Helen was talking about earlier, 9 out of 10 women experience menopausal symptoms. So that's the majority, isn't it? There are very few that don't. And then 1/4 of them say that they've hidden their symptoms at work. And it's hard because you don't want to be talking about this. You don't want to feel like people looking at you and sort of, feeling like you're not able to do your job or you're struggling. You don't want that. But if we can get to the point where workplaces realise that they need some kind of policy, a workplace policy, that they need to have things in place that will help women to be able to go to a designated person and talk to them about it, then it's going to open up that discussion, and then they're not going to feel necessarily that they have to hide away in a corner. They can get help, don't have to tell everybody that they're menopausal, but they can tell the right person and get the right help and support that they need. And 1/3 of working women say their menopause symptoms negatively impacted their performance at work. And I remember that feeling. It was awful, and just not knowing what to do about it. And 2/3 of women would not feel comfortable speaking to their supervisor even about their symptoms, and 2/3 wouldn't feel comfortable speaking to their supervisor. I've said that already. I've doubled up my notes there. So 79% of menopausal working women feel their employer doesn't provide or do not know if they provide support related to menopause. And 75% of women would like to see menopause support in their workplace. So my final slide here is really to say, what are the benefits? Let's look at the benefits of becoming a menopause inclusive workplace. That's where we want to be, isn't it? And that's, that's the sort of drum that I'm banging, and I want people to join in with that. It improves employee retention. What organisation doesn't want that? It increases productivity and contribution levels. Women come into work feeling confident that help is available. They could take what breaks they needed. They could even have time off if it became necessary. And then I was talking to a lady just this morning at a coffee morning, and she said that in the end, having had some time off, she had a talk with HR, and they weren't playing ball, and they sort of tried to help by giving her a little care bundle, which had a fan in it and some extra pads. And I was like, well, that's nice, but it doesn't really help. And so she resigned from her job that she had loved for so many years. And she just said, that was the National Health Service here in Britain, and they had no clue on how to help. And she says, she wasn't the only person. So it will reduce absenteeism if we have workplace policies. It will support employees' health and well-being overall, and that's always a good thing. And it will increase employee engagement, reduce the cost of attrition, that's losing people from the workforce, and meaning that you don't have to recruit and train others. And it will strengthen the employee value proposition, which is always going to be a good thing. And it supports diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategies. And of course, that's something that is so important in the wider world at the minute as well, isn't it? And not just when it comes to menopause. So, as I conclude, how could you work with me if you wanted to? What I encourage people to do is to book a coaching call by going to my website. The link is there. I think Helen has already sent that out. The moment my website is having a big makeover, but you can go on there and book a coaching call. And I promise you that a coaching call with me is not a hard sell. What I'm interested in is, where are you at in this journey? And what are you struggling with? And is there a way that I could fit into helping you with that? And if there is, and we're a good fit together, then we can go forward. But I'm very happy for people you know, for us to come to a conclusion that it's not a good fit. But if you have a coaching call with me, you'll get some good value from that. I will give you some tips that will help you, and you can go away with those and not look back, or we can go on to have a look at how we can work together. And there are a number of ways that we can do that. I have courses and I have one-to-ones of various lengths, and I'm just in the process of looking at putting together a single VIP day, which I think would be very good value for anybody who's interested in that. So thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you, Helen, for organising this Trailblazers Talk series. And it's been good to see you all.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Diane. That was so much super helpful information. And I think that's probably a lot of information that people hadn't realized, you know, and so they're going to take a minute to chew over that. But you are in the groups, they can reach out and contact you. And I'll put your web link in there too. And I made a couple of notes, and I was going to say to you, you know, one of your last slides, kind of working back, when it said about, you know, women not wanting to bring things up in the workplace, you know, I think part of that, you know, might be, you know, it's almost like not wanting to bring to anyone's attention that you're a woman and that you might not be the equal to a man in the workplace. You know, and it's like, I don't want special treatment, I don't want to be seen as less, you know, because I've done, you know, run into that before. I'm like, I don't, you know, I'm struggling enough to get my voice heard. I don't want to run into a situation where I'm going to be considered less in any way. And in fact, one of my clients I was talking to, she is interviewing for a job today. I think there were like 7 guys going for the same position and her, you know, so you know, so she felt at a disadvantage, and I'm like, no, you can bring things to the table that they can't, you know. So I think just stepping into our power as women, and feeling equal on the stage is such a huge thing in the workplace, and this really gets you. And I think that sometimes with the with menopause coming when it does for women as well, not only have we got which interferes with self-care and kind of taking care of ourselves at that point, we often have, you know, teenagers at that point, and or we have elderly parents demanding our attention as well. So you've got it kind of coming from all angles. So
that's exactly right.
So it's a lot to balance. So I definitely think you're right in getting the support. You know, however we get that, you know, from a friend group, or, you know, however we get that, family. Certainly, I love what you were saying about getting, you know, doctors, because I've talked to a lot of women about going to see doctors, and they're like, oh, I don't want to go, they might have bad news. And I'm like, well, I mean, maybe, but by the time you've worried about it, it's way worse. You might just as well go. So getting that team of doctors on board, you know, whether you need someone for a mammogram, a dermatologist, you know, just start getting in the habit of getting everything checked out, and then that will stand you in such great stead. And I think it's so true what you were saying about the healthy lifestyle, because, you know, when you're younger, it's kind of like your body's a car, you know, you can get away with a lot when you're younger. You know, you can just, you know, 0 to 60, slam on the brakes, around the corner, and you're fine. But then when you start getting a little bit older, you're like, oh, I think I better be a bit nicer to my vehicle. So, but you had so many great points, Diane, and I know that what you're doing is really going to be helping women, because, you know, sometimes even just knowing that you're not the only one that's struggling with things, because not all doctors are sympathetic, not all have a great deal of resources, and particularly if you're going to see like a general practitioner, they may not really have spent a lot of continuing education time on women's issues in particular, so they may miss a lot of stuff. So that's why it's really important to go and see someone who specializes more in that, so they can, you know, they're more up to date on things, that you can go and get some more specific care. But I think what you're doing is fabulous. I think that this would be such a huge benefit to workplaces. Obviously, you've taught the statistics, and really what it's costing companies. And you know, you've got the hard stats, but there's so much intangible things like the loss of knowledge, the loss of experience,
yeah,
those things can't really be financially measured, but
no.
that's a lot when women have to leave the workforce. Um, and you know, and just having or not having women there to mentor people coming up through the ranks
Yeah.
is huge as well.
Yeah, you need people with that experience in the workforce, don't you, to be able to do that successfully.
You do. You do. And I mean, and you hear that a lot these days. You know, I thought I could because I saw someone who looked like me who was doing it. You know, so if you see women in positions of powerful leadership, you're like, okay, then I can do it too. So we want to keep them there.
Absolutely, we do. It's my passion, and yeah, banging my drum.
Yes, I've got so
with
much
a marching band behind me, I think.
Yes, yes. And you know, and it really hasn't been something that's been talked about a lot, particularly in terms of the workplace. And I really hope that that's going to change over the coming months and years. I think it needs to, and I think that it would just benefit everyone always round. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Diane, and sharing all your lovely wisdom. And I know that people are going to get a lot out of that, and I really hope they reach out to you. Oh, and I talked to Karen the other day with a PR company, and she said, yeah, she gets requests for experts on what you do all the time. So you two have got to get together.
Yeah, she messaged me, so I will get back to her.
Perfect. Yes, it's such a huge issue. Yes. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Diane.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. We stop the recording now. And